quasars, and there was something that really interested me. So maybe he's from Princeton, but I suspect he has deep ties from here because I read that he is involved in a hyper supreme cam on Subaru. Now, I don't think the car dealerships know about this, so we'd like you to explain, and you're also going to be talking about romance in the Milky Way. Fabulous.
So I first have to tell the Subaru telescope on Mauna Kea in Hawaii. It's built and operated by the Japanese astronomical community. And Subaru, it's a Japanese car company, as you know. The word Subaru in Japanese literally refers to the Pleiades star cluster. And if you look, next time you see a Subaru, the Subaru car, and look at their little logo, you will see a little pattern of 7 stars. The car is named after the star cluster, and the telescope is also named after the star cluster. And so it is not a coincidence that they have the same. So that's the answer here. But that's not the story that I was planning to say. So Marcelli did a wonderful job of introducing you to the Cerro Tololo Observatory, which is where my story takes place as well. So let me describe what happens in an observatory. Indeed, exactly the same observatory that she was describing. And no, I never saw a scorpion. I've never seen a tarantula. I've heard many stories about them. I always said, I want to see one of those. It'd be so cool. I've never seen one. Nevertheless. So there, then you'll have to anyway, the observatory has multiple telescopes. There's, I don't know, 6 or 7 telescopes all together on a mountaintop, just on a plane that's just a few hundred yards across. And so all the astronomers, each astronomer is assigned to use a separate telescope. So we're a little community. As Marcelli said, it's very isolated, but in that isolation, you are with your fellow astronomers. And so what do? You all have dinner together, and then you go up to the mountaintop itself, and then you try to get up there before the sunset, so you can get ready for the night's observing. And what everyone does is then gather at the edge of the observatory and watches the sunset together. And then we argue about how good the skies will be tonight. That little wisp of cloud, is that going to come and get us, or is it going to stay clear all night? And astronomers are all amateur weather people. We are fascinated by clouds. But in any case, so we watch the sunset, and then we say whether that was a particularly good sunset and whether we saw the green flash. And everyone argues about whether or not they saw it. And then it gets dark, and the stars come out. And then it's spectacular. The skies over your head. We're on a mountaintop in Chile, in the Chilean Andes. We're at 7,000 feet. As Marcelli described, the view is truly spectacular. The ocean behind you, 14,000-foot peaks of the Chilean Andes behind, on the other side, and then this starry sky over your head. And it's dark. There are no lights, and there are no artificial lights. So the only light there is from the stars in the sky. And most dramatically, what we see is the Milky Way stretching over our heads. And of course, once it gets dark enough for that, you run in and start operating your telescope, and then you're busy all night. How many of you went to Beth Willman's talk last night at the Sea Film Theater? She described the structure of the Milky Way. We live inside a disk of stars. We are embedded in that disk, and so when we look out at the stars, what we see is a band of light, which we call the Milky Way, which stretches all the way around the sky, a full circle. Now, of course, we're standing here. We can see half of the band. The other half is beneath our feet. And so we can only see half that band at once. And in fact, from here in the northern hemisphere, we really don't get a good view of that other half. We can see it when conditions are right, sort of low on the horizon. But if you're in Chile, that band of light, the brightest part towards the center of the Milky Way, is directly overhead. And it's one of the most dramatic sights you can possibly see. If any of you find yourself on a moonless night, no clouds, away from city lights on mountaintop in Chile, please do not forget to look up. And really, it's a beautiful sight. So there we are, we're observing all night. So what we're doing in practice is sitting in front of a computer terminal, sending commands to the telescope saying, okay, let's look at this galaxy. and take an exposure, and then after a certain amount of time, we decide we've had enough time on this one, we go to the next one. And if we set up a long exposure, we quickly sneak outside and then enjoy that view. So there we are, often at 2 in the morning, we are out there and bumping into each other, and of course it's dark, so we really bump into each other. And again, we try to avoid the tarantulas, and we admire the view. And then, oh my goodness, the exposure is about 10, and you run back. So it's November 1986, and I was there. It was actually my second time there. And I was using the 1.5 meter telescope here, and there was a very pretty, also Brazilian woman who was doing her PhD research on the 1 meter telescope there. So we got to know each other, and we became friends. But you know, that was it. And then I went back to continue my PhD research at Berkeley after my observing run was finished. She went back to the University of Sao Paulo, where she was doing her studies. We both said, Chile was really fun. And she said, it was so much fun, I'm going to see if I can finagle a longer visit. So she actually made arrangements to spend a full year in Chile, starting just 6 months later. The next time I found myself coming back to Chile, she had also just arrived for a full year-long stay. We bumped into each other. Oh, it's great to see you. I remember you from last time. So I did my observing. I went back again. It's now the third time I'm back in Chile. This is now December of 1987. We bump into each other again, this time again on the mountaintop itself. And somehow things clicked at that point. And so I have very fond memories. I'm standing together under that Milky Way, watching the stars. Now, one of the things that happened in that particular, I was looking at galaxies, and my particular, as has already been described, we're all geographers. So my particular project was mapping a particular set of galaxies. So, and I had a lot of galaxies, so I was just doing these short exposures, 5 minutes each. So what I would do is I'd set up an exposure, 5 minutes, I'd run over to her telescope and hang out with her for a while, and run back as fast as I could to keep an eye on the clock. But during that observing run, I discovered a quasar, a particularly cool quasar. So I ran over and talked her into doing some observations of that thing herself. And to make a very long story short, we ended up writing a paper about that quasar. And of course, it required me running back. So anyway, that was December 1987, and then she was still in Chile. As I said, she was spending a full year there. But my week-long observing run was over, and I had to say goodbye. Back I went to Berkeley. I think Steve, you were at Berkeley at that time. So that's actually about the time I first met Steve. And so we started corresponding. Now this is 1987. Email was brand new. And email to South America was even brand newer at that time. So it was and of course Skype didn't exist yet, as you might imagine. And phone calls were far more expensive than they are today. So keeping up a relationship was a challenge. We wrote a lot of letters back and forth. Anyway, 6 months later, I found myself, I had more galaxies. I had to go back to Chile. And indeed, my next trip to Chile coincided with the end of that 1 year. So we found ourselves together again in Chile on that mountaintop, and then had a wonderful 2 weeks where we traveled through Chile to see, well, there's all kinds of fun things that happened there. And then she went back to Brazil, and I went back to Berkeley. And again, an email to Brazil back then was even more limited than it was to Chile. And indeed, Marcella, you will appreciate the story. She was working at INPI. You know INPI. It's a research institute outside of Sao Paulo. And they had a single email account for the entire astronomy group. And she describes that an email would arrive from me to her, but of course it was addressed, as it were, to everybody. And they would say, Sophia, you've got another email from that guy in Berkeley. Anyway, 2 years passed, a very long story, but we found ourselves married. This was early 1990. So we found ourselves, so that was 1990 that we got married. And of course, Chile, which is where we first met, has very, very fond memories for us. So 1990, doing the arithmetic, this is our 25th anniversary, and we said we have to do something special. Now, it also happens to be the start of construction of the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, which is being built in Chile on a mountaintop, actually not Cerro Tololo, the observatory, but one mountain over, literally one mountain over. Almost, well, you can't quite walk, it's about 20 kilometers. Yeah, 25 kilometers or something. But it's really one mountain over. What's that?
I know some people who ran out
From
there.
one to the other?
Yeah.
Oh.
So we are thinking about the LSST DES marathon.
Okay, I'm not going there. But anyway, it was announced, and Steve was one of the key people, that to celebrate the start of construction of LSST, in April, we would have a ceremony called the First Stone Ceremony, at which we would formally inaugurate the beginning of the building of this telescope. And Sophia and I looked at each other and said, we've got to go to that. So indeed, in April, all of us went, and Steve was there, and Suzanne in the back, you were there as well, and nobody else, I think, in the room were there. But we had a ceremony at the mountain, at the summit, where the president of Chile came to celebrate our 25th winning anniversary. and there we were, looking from the summit of Cerro Patron, where the LSST will be built, looking to Cerro Tololo, which is, I mean, you could literally see the telescopes that we used now 30 years ago when we first met, almost 30 years ago. And so that really came full circle. But we still very much associate, first of all, Chile and the mountaintops, but that view of the Milky Way stretching over the skies as a symbol of our life together.